Hi, welcome to the Men's Forum. I'm your host, Gary Costanza, and tonight we're going to bring you the first of two parts of a series of compilations of TV talk shows that I and friends of mine, activists, fellow activists, have participated in, that I've taped over the years, and we're going to show you excerpts of the relevant and interesting parts of these shows that really discuss a lot of things about gender issues and gender roles, current events, namely things like, well, let me see. Let me list the three clips that we're going to bring to you tonight. Two of the shows were called Rolanda, hosted by a woman named Rolanda Watts. She used to be a newscaster. And two of those shows, as I said, we're going to bring excerpts to you tonight. One of them is Final Take. That was I guess, an issue-oriented talk show where they had panel discussions. And on some of these shows, there are like people you recognize or people you would know. A lot of them you don't know at all. But they are all issue-oriented, unlike talk shows that you see today. These are serious issues that are discussed intelligently, and I generally participate from the audience in almost all of these shows. Some friends of mine also participate, activists also. Well, let me name the clips that I'm bringing you tonight. They're about 5 to 10 minutes each. The first is Rolanda. The title of the show was Gender Wars. It's a 6-minute clip, and we discuss commitment, divorce, loss of kids and houses, the results of divorce. Of course, I get up and I speak for the male point of view. Very notable about that show was, there's a movie that's pretty well known now called The Brothers McMullen. It won, I believe, one of the earliest Sundance Awards, and it was filmed on a shoestring. I love that movie, by the way. The Brothers McMullen. Who was it? Edward Burns produced that on a real shoestring. The history of that movie is a whole story in itself. But in the green room, actually on that show, I don't know why I was invited to the green room. Normally that's for guests on the stage, but I was a guest in the audience. I met this guy Jack, who you'll see on the first Rolanda clip, who starred in The Brothers McMullen. It's funny, I was talking to him in the green room, and he told me about this movie that he's filming with about 3 Irish brothers, and of course, like years later, I saw the movie and I said, wow, I met him. That was great. That's the first show. The second show, another Rolanda show, we discussed domestic violence. A fellow men's rights activist, Mel Feit, is in it. He's probably the star, I would say. Me and a friend of mine, Rosemary Trulio, who has been on the Men's Forum. Mel Feit, probably the best, most forceful and articulate men's activist there ever was. You'll see him in action. You'll applaud. That's about 4 minutes. And the final clip for tonight comes from Final Take. It's about sexual harassment. Mel is also on that show, Mel Feit. Gloria Allred's on that, as well as a whole panel of people. And I get up and I speak my mind, as I do in all these shows. That's about a 10-minute clip. But you'll get into these discussions. They're interesting. Well, without further ado, here come the clips.
We look at so many things differently. Today we're trying to find some similarities. And you had a question.
Actually, I had a statement. The psychologist has said that Jack and Joanne seems to want to live with Jack because she's having problems financially and her lease is up. I don't hear love. Okay?
I don't
That's
think
what
the
I hear.
subject would have come up if love wasn't there. We didn't have this discussion because we don't love each other. And part of the discussion was, aren't you happy with this relationship now? And he says, yes, I'm very happy, but I don't want to change it. I mean,
Question.
Okay, and again for Joanne, you are very assertive, not aggressive, assertive, and that's great. I want to know when you're going to ask Jack to marry you, if ever, and even before that, how long are you going to give him before he makes a decision as to you living together?
You know, I have a big issue with ultimatums. I don't believe in ultimatums. I don't think that saying, if you don't let me move in, I'm going to leave you, because obviously that doesn't mean I love him very much. If I could just pick up and split, then I don't really love him, do I? And I really care about this relationship, and I think putting time frames on anything is a bad idea. And quite frankly, I want to say something about being assertive and aggressive. You know, he said, I want what I want when I want it. And how come it's not okay for a woman to say that, and I'm being accused of being pushy and aggressive?
I think we should respect a man's decision not to get married, because in this day and age, marriage and maybe a subsequent divorce is very rough on a man. The man is still supposed to be the main breadwinner, and in event of divorce, he probably will lose his kids and his home. It's a big decision to make, it really is.
Okay. There's a gentleman over there who has a comment as well.
Yes, for the lady with the purple, what's her name?
That's Joanne.
Joanne, well, I feel what you should do, you trying to save a buck. That's the best thing you try to do. Well, if your lease went out, why don't you go live in the project?
I want to know what happens.
That's a good idea.
I want to know what happened to love. Where is all that? You're so worried about divorce in 20 years. Just go with your feelings. I think Joanne wants more than she's letting on. Yeah, definitely.
The whole audience said, yeah.
If he doesn't want it now, he's never going to want it. It's true. I know.
All right, thank you. We're covering the battle of the sexes here today, or at least looking at some of the differences and how men and women can interpret things totally different ways, even when nobody says a thing. Take a look. Here are the Rolanda players again.
He's been so quiet lately, so remote. He's probably having an affair.
I'm really worried about my job. If I got fired, how will I ever face Carol?
Okay, what do you see in that, Aaron?
Well, that's the sort of negative telepathy, you know. If he's not communicating with me, he must be doing something wrong. And the way we get out of that is by asking questions and saying, how do you feel? What's going on? You know, you seem withdrawn lately. Is something troubling you? Then that gives him a chance to speak.
Yeah, I get that all the time from Laura. She'll say, are you having an affair with somebody on me? When I come home from a rehearsal or something, she'll smell my neck or smell my clothes. You know,
that's because I've had a lot of bad relationships in the past.
Now there's that luggage thing.
Yeah, and I know I shouldn't.
Yeah, I got to
bring my past into that.
I think that's the one thing we always hear, that's one of the biggest mistakes that men and women make, is taking all that luggage into another relationship. I mean, why should Ralph have to suffer for all those other jerks? You know?
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, you were shaking your head a lot, Jack, when we were talking about the not listening or the.
Well, Joanne, as you probably have all witnessed, is pretty vociferous, I must say. I mean, she likes to talk a lot, and there are points where I just enjoy a quiet moment. It doesn't mean that I'm not communicating. It doesn't mean that I'm hiding anything. But quiet is not a bad thing. You know that. Or do you?
I do know that. I don't think there's anything wrong with quiet, but you seem to pick very, very inconvenient times to suddenly want to be quiet.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, good times for you,
right? Like on an airplane.
Yeah, like on the airplane.
Part of what's going on here is a lot of these are what we would call situational difficulties. They're not so much about the relationship. They're male-female things. We talk a lot about this in gender war, gender peace. Women use twice as many words in the course of a day as a man does. Men, you know, coming out of hunting and playing sports where you can't talk, you've got to signal, and building construction projects. Men have a lot of tradition of kind of signing to one another. Women often don't get those signs. And in order to communicate with women, we need to understand they need us to talk to them. They need us to get verbal. They don't get the nonverbal signals. Like when we get together guy to guy, sometimes, I mean, we can fish all day and not say a word, but we'll have communicated a great deal. We'll have a sense of intimacy. But it's not like that man to woman.
But we got to get to that point. I mean, because it is hard for us to not have people, not have you talk to us. I mean, how do you, we got to get to the point of what we can do to help our men talk more, and it has to be a 50-50 thing.
First, we need to stop blaming. Second, we need to start listening and understanding that we're different. So men know they need to talk a little more to women. Women know they need to leave men alone once in a while to kind of sort things out. Because guys do it through sorting it out alone a lot. Women do it through talking it out a lot.
Yeah.
And the last thing is we need to tell the whole truth to one another. Not just the anger and the disappointment, but the love and affection that's underneath all that. All that junk that's on the surface.
Here, here. Okay. I know that you have a question. We're going to let you ask it right after this. We'll be right back. There's been a tremendous rise of women's violence against men from 1985 to 1991, and we here at Rolanda are always concerned about violent family situations, and that's why we thought it was important to do this story. I like the points that we've been making. It doesn't matter who's violent. If your home is violent, then we've got to help. There are currently fewer than 6 shelters for battered men in the United States. And we're about to introduce you to the man who helped found the very first one. Where are you, George? George Gillilland. He founded the very first one, the very first shelter for men in the United States. You're joining us live via satellite from St. Paul, Minnesota. Thanks for joining us, George.
Thank you for having me.
George, tell me if you could what the situation was before you founded the shelter. If you were a man being battered by your wife or girlfriend, where could you go? What situation were you in?
Well, you could do the same as I and many other men have done. You can spend the days and nights in your car with very little money in your pocket, or you can humiliate yourself by turning to friends or relatives and begging for a place to stay and food in your stomach if you want to. Other than that, there's virtually no place to turn to. And fortunately, I've heard some comments from some ladies in your audience that have brought that to light, whose thinking is exactly the same as mine. I am not known as a men's rights activist by those that know me and know what we do. I'm known as a man that demands nothing more than equality and the same continuum of treatment for every victim of domestic abuse. I don't care if it's a man or a woman, if they're black or white, lesbian or gay, Catholic, Protestant, Buddhist, or whatever they are. Every person that is a victim deserves the same type of treatment and compassion.
That's right.
And I think, too, that any act of abuse or assault ought to be treated equally. And as you've heard from some other people, this is not the case at all.
From the audience, George.
Just I have a statement. I'm not condoning this at all. But I have to be sympathetic to the women because women have been battered for centuries, and also murdered.
Who gets battered?
Again, I'm not condoning it. I'm not. I'm really not. I'm just saying that me as a woman, I have to be a little bit more sympathetic to my...
What difference does it make who gets battered or slapped, whether it's a male or a female? It is a serious thing.
Relationship.
I think it's important to put things into some kind of perspective. Domestic violence is about power and control. It's about a relationship where there's a whole pattern about trying to maintain power and control, very much like racism in our country. You know, those of us who are white are born into a kind of privilege just by the color of our skin, and we think that gives us a right to power. And men who batter women are born into this country thinking because they're born male, they have a right to have power over, to be the king of the castle.
I think I asked you
we're talking about
from the audience, please.
About power and control.
I just think it's terrible.
Charlotte, I believe I asked you about 3 years ago, where do you come off by saying that domestic violence is man's desire to control a woman? And yet 3 years ago I asked you, how do you account for domestic violence then in gay and lesbian relationships? And you dodged that question, and every other advocate has been dodging it ever since. So it doesn't hold any water, Charlotte.
I agree with her that it is about power and control, but women hit to exercise power and control and to coerce also.
And I have to say also, I think that Charlotte's approach is dangerous. I really do. Because by scapegoating men, you get men angry, so you get more male violence. And by implicitly condoning female... No, please, I'll let you finish. By implicitly condoning female violence, you get more of that. So all around, you get more violence, more victims. But you see, that's good for Charlotte because that's more money for her.
And from the audience.
Nobody is
from the audience,
I just think it's terrible how the women are so insensitive to men's pain.
I know men who are abused, and it's a terrible thing, and I think Mel's skirt looks great.
How do the laws pertain to this? I want to talk to you about how the laws pertain to battered men when we come back. We'll be right back.
We are back with our audience foreperson, Ramona, and the verdict. Did South Florida Business Journal cross the line? Should John Kirsch have been fired after Cindy's complaint of sexual harassment? What was the vote?
The vote was the entire audience agreed except 2 that he should not be fired.
That he should not be fired?
Yes.
And the 2 who voted
were men.
Were men. All right. No particular significance attached to that. We'll just leave that alone. Thank you very much, Ramona. Now, here's an interesting dilemma. What's more important, the right of free expression or the right not to be sexually harassed? We visited a small town in Tennessee where sexual harassment charges and the First Amendment collided head-on. To some, it's a tasteful painting of a partially clad woman.
You can see that it was not anything to be alarmed about.
To others, it's viewed as sexual harassment.
I don't think an employer can safely say that he knows that this is good nudity and that's bad nudity in the workplace.
Now this painting, titled Gwen, has turned the old Civil War city of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, into a constitutional battleground.
I knew my First Amendment rights had been violated.
This story of censorship and sensibility began several months ago when Gwen was hung in the rotunda of Murfreesboro City Hall. The painting was among a collection of 40 being displayed by local artist Maxine Henderson.
No one raised an eyebrow.
But Lori Crowder did. She's an assistant school superintendent who spotted the painting on her way to a board meeting. Crowder filed a sexual harassment complaint with the city.
I personally find art in any form, whether it be a painting, a Greek statue, or a picture out of Playboy, which displays genitals, buttocks, and or nipples of the human body, to be pornographic, and in this instance, very offensive and degrading to me as a woman. I reserve the right not to have it thrust in my face on my way into a meeting with my superiors, most of whom are men.
Murfreesboro City Attorney Tom Reed went to investigate.
It was obvious when I looked at it that we were faced with a situation where this lady had no clothes on. I mean, she was nude.
Reed removed the painting and hid it in his office closet, satisfying Lori Crowder but enraging artist Maxine Henderson.
And what really hurt me was that I was the contributor and someone could come along and say, take it down, picture down. And that the city would honor her rights and not mine.
So Henderson, a 66-year-old grandmother, filed a complaint of her own, a federal lawsuit claiming the city breached her First Amendment rights to freedom of expression.
You know, somebody has to stand up and say, I'm going to use this for my protection.
City Attorney Tom Reed insists he was right in removing the painting, claiming a worker's protection from sexual harassment supersedes an artist's right of expression.
The female employees here, they don't have a choice. They have to, this is their workplace. So there is a distinct difference between a workplace and a museum where art is displayed.
It's both a working place and a public forum. Obviously, people work there, so it's a working place. But the city having chosen to utilize its facility as an art gallery, then from a constitutional standpoint, it becomes an art gallery.
In her suit, Maxine Henderson is asking for $1 and attorney's fees, insisting that she's fighting for a principle, not money.
The artists should have assurances that they're not going to be censored.
Meanwhile, she believes Lori Crowder's sexual harassment complaint only harmed her own cause.
I think it's sad that someone would trivialize this when there's so many women that possibly this law is so valuable to them.
We're back. Would you have removed the painting from the City Hall area? Let's ask the panel members. Anybody feel that the city officials took the proper action by removing the painting?
I think this is a very dangerous trend here. I think we're headed down a slippery slope where the posting of artistic material or political material that offends people can be regarded as sexual harassment.
I think we have to look at the content. In this issue, I think we have to look at whether or not this is in fact that employee's workplace.
Dr. Klein, you go into a lot of these companies. Do you tell employees or do you tell employers that if there's a picture of a nude woman up on a wall that it has to be taken down? Is that sexual harassment? How closely do you call these things?
Well, I think we keep losing perspective here. When we're talking about a workplace or an educational institution, we're talking about a captive audience that ought to have a right to work there, to learn there, free of bias or harassment or discrimination of any kind.
Carrie, one quick question to you. You went through a major ordeal with your sexual harassment case. Do you feel that this kind of case trivializes the sexual harassment issue?
In one sense, I think it's good, like you're bringing it up and you're discussing it here, because you can discuss it. I think that's the important thing about harassment, is the only way to prevent it is to talk about it and come to some agreement. I mean, really the last thing you want to do is show up in court and go through 8 years of hell.
On that point, it's time to put this question to our jury. Is the right not to be sexually harassed greater than the right of free expression? Final Take has the verdict in just a moment here on Lifetime. Some closing arguments on sexual harassment. Our final take for tonight when we come back.
Women do not have to go into the workplaces now with bags over their head.
Welcome back. I'm joined once again by our foreperson, Ramona, who has our audience verdict. Now, remember, the question is the right not to be sexually harassed in the workplace greater than the First Amendment guarantee of free expression? And the verdict?
The verdict of the audience was that the guarantee of free expression was greater than sexual harassment in the workplace. And so the vote was 2-1. 2-1 in favor of free expression, so the painting remains.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ramona. Now our audience will have the opportunity to ask the questions they've thought about here tonight. So we're going to turn to you now and find out who has the burning questions. Let's see some hands up here. Your question.
Since Gloria seems to agree that harassment is in the eye of the beholder, could I then feel offended by a low-cut dress that a woman might be wearing in my workplace? Could I have her cover up if that offends me?
Well, it's really going to be a question of not only what you find to be hostile or abusive or sexual harassment, what would a reasonable person in your situation feel is hostile or abusive. So I do think that it's a fair question, but really the question is, would reasonable people be offended by that or not, and how low is it? I think we know.
But you did agree with taking down the picture that the woman did feel was offensive. It was only her.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be everybody agreeing. It also depends not only on your subjective judgment of what is sexual harassment or offensive or degrading or humiliating, but what would a reasonable person feel?
A reasonable man would find that a woman sitting across from him in a very tight sweater, she'd be making a sexually explicit statement that would interfere with his job performance. It'd be a hostile working environment for most men. Is that sexual harassment? You're not really answering the question.
But it really depends. And the question is, you didn't say anything about sexually explicit statements. You added that
a woman in a very tight sweater is making a sexually explicit statement.
Well, let me just say, I think that women are generally entitled to wear that which is appropriate to the workplace, and it's a case-by-case situation.
But men are not permitted to speak their minds.
Women do not have to go into the workplaces now with bags over their head or long gowns or completely shrouded the way they are in Iran. We're not going to stand for that, and you're not going to put us back in the jail.
And I don't think men should have to go into I don't think men should have to go into the workplace with gags in their mouths.
One final concluding
What we're trying to do is humanize the workplace, and we're trying to get people to understand what it's like to be on the downside of a power dynamic, and to recognize that we don't want a tyranny of the majority, that my way is not the way, my way is a way, and we need to talk about it.
We've got another question up here.
Hi, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed those clips. Bring back a lot of memories. I as I said, that was when talk television was issue-oriented, intelligent, not moronic like most of the shows now. But I hope you enjoyed that. And next week will be part 2 of the TV talk show compilations. And that'll be it for us here at the Men's Forum. Good night.